We're live. All right, everyone. Hello. Happy whichever day you're watching this. Today is Sunday. Um, welcome back to the stream. I'm Patrick. You know Austin down below, and we have a special guest today. He is a friend of mine from high school. My first, my
Way
first,
First and only friend.
first. Well, I not say first and only friend, but my first roommate for sure. His name is David. Welcome to the stream, David. So yeah, it's been how are you today?
I'm doing well on today.
You're doing well today? All right, cool. So today we are discussing a film called Minari. It was released, actually I think it was released this year, but it was produced or finished in 2020 or end of 2020 or something like that. And yeah, it's an American drama film. I'm just gonna read off some quick facts about it from the Wikipedia page. Also, there's spoilers, so if you haven't watched the movie, be warned. Spoilers alert. It's a 2020 American drama film written directed by Lee Isaac Chung. It stars Steven Yeun and Han Yuri. Wait, I'm going to mispronounce that, but as I think two main the two main characters, or two of the main characters. And then it also stars Alan Kim and Noel Kate Cho as the Yi family overall. And then also Yoon Yoo Jun as Sunja, who is the grandmother. She plays a very prominent role, as we will discuss later. But yeah, essentially the movie is about a Korean immigrant family moving from California to Arkansas in hopes of starting a farm, or at least the father wants to start a farm there. And basically the process and journey at which they had to endure. Yeah, that's essentially what the film is about. So yeah, let's just start going right into it. How did you feel about the film overall? Just quick thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I like the film. Definitely, a different flavor, right? Just because, the film is an American film, but mostly, a good chunk of it, right? It has Korean dialogue, right? And then, it has English sprinkled in, but the main characters, the whole cast, all the dialogue, spoken Korean. So that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, this is a drama, so it kind of had a lot of meaning. It's a lot of family interaction. So I liked watching it, and I liked the way how they brought up some of the conflicts. But some of it just seemed maybe a bit rushed here and there. But I kind of overall I liked it. It was a good film. Very engaging, kept me interested, especially with the main, Steven Yeun characters, Jacob, right? Just how he tries to navigate, and also I think a big prominent role was actually just the son, right? David, how he kind of try to fit in and also try to reconcile his kind of American identity with his grandma coming over, being Korean, and trying to I guess get along with her. So I love those two interactions. I think that was the main action, right? The main ones between that the conflict between Jacob and his wife Monica, and David and the grandmother. But overall, enjoy the movie. Just enjoyed seeing how everyone try to go through the conflicts and challenges that they come to when they move to this new area in Arkansas, of all places.
Yeah, Arkansas, as I like to call it.
Arkansas.
A pirate's favorite Kansas. Anyway, sorry, that was a really bad joke. David, what are your thoughts?
No, I think it's really interesting, the portrayal of the Asian American upbringing, especially not being Korean myself. It's just really interesting, the similarities that is growing up in America that I've seen like shine through the film. I think it's a really good storytelling film. It kind of brings the story. I think it captures the essence and like hints at a lot of deeper meaning throughout the film. I think it's really interesting, and especially at this time that we're living in 2021, with all the recent, you know, hate against specific groups recently. So I think it's really impactful just watching that film. Um, Hearing from my Korean friends that they do play that card game, which I don't know the name of, that the grandma taught taught the kids. I thought that was really interesting to see it like brought up like in the Asian American household, and just stuff like that. Overall, I think it was a really engaging film, and it told a story. Uh, and then I guess like some good films, it leaves you like curious about like what happens next.
Overall, yeah, I think I mostly agree with you guys about it. I think for me, I think the part I really liked was seeing that interaction between the grandmother and David. So yeah, it's Sunja and David. I really enjoyed seeing that interaction because personally I really related to it because like my grandmother helped raise me when I was a kid. So like yeah, that sequence was like super relatable. Although maybe not the part where like David was being like a really big brat in the beginning. That wasn't really. I never did that to my grandmother. But like after basically they started connecting those two and like seeing them like actually like form a relationship and a bond was like really heartwarming. But yeah, I think for the I don't know why, but like I thought the film was like always going to go toward like a really dark direction, like much darker than it ended up. So I don't know if it's just me, but I kept on seeing like really like weird avenues where it can go. Like for instance, like one of the characters, Will, who is the guy who helps Jake with the farming. He was a little eccentric, right? In his behavior.
Paul.
Oh shoot, it's Will. Okay, sorry. Paul. I think the actor's name is Will. I think that's how I mistake.
Will Patton, yeah.
Yeah, Will Patton. Sorry, Paul. My bad. Thanks for correcting me. Paul, his character. So I thought for whatever reason I kept on thinking this film might go into like a little bit like a thriller horror kind of thing, and like Paul would be like the beginning of it. Like he would do some really weird stuff. Because he was kind of eccentric, and I thought that like maybe they would go an avenue with that and see like because he's so eccentric, like it would sort of like it would be like detail like that relationship between him and Jacob and sort of like the difficulties of like raising a family in rural Arkansas and in like 1983, which is when the film is set. So I thought it would be like kind of take it in that direction. I also thought that like maybe at the end they were hinting at like, oh yeah, they're gonna separate, like Jacob and Monica, who are the husband and wife, they were gonna like separate,
Yeah.
and then Jacob was just gonna be alone. And like there was a scene where David's friend's dad, I think he was staying over at his trailer or house or whatever. He told David that the previous person who owned that property killed himself because he went broke or something. Like he implied it, and I thought that was maybe what was going to happen as well. I thought like Jacob might have, I don't know, committed suicide. And I think there were like signs of it. Like I don't know if you remember in the beginning when they were hanging up the swing. Like there was like they were doing the rope.
Oh, the rope.
And it looked like it looked a lot like a noose, and like I was like, yo, if someone's gonna someone's gonna kill themselves with painting, I was. This is where the foreshadowing begins. So I always thought like this movie was like always gonna go in a certain direction, and like I was really, I was dragged. I was kind of like not excited. Excited is not the word, but I was always like into the story to see like how it would unfold. And it never. I expected it to go more like dramatic, like way darker than it actually did. And I'm like, not to say I'm disappointed, but yeah, it was a bit of it didn't meet. I guess it didn't meet those expectations, but and maybe in a better way. Like it's better that it didn't because yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was yeah. There were some points where I thought it might have gone darker or a lot more mature, right? Especially
Yeah.
I think like the character of Paul, I think he was made to be uncomfortable, right? He's kind of shown to be, as you said, eccentric, very religious. Well, I think we kind of relate, to a character like that seeing today. He would be, probably someone who, we probably relate to someone as someone of the right wing, is very conservative, or and there's that connotation, right, where race could have been a thing, right? But surprisingly, and this guy, this character Paul, defies our expectations and stereotypes. It's just, he's still a guy who willing to help the family, and doesn't turn out to be any kind of threat or anything. But I think that's just my expectation. Just seeing this guy who's just kind of pushes and kind of expects things from Jake, especially after he revealed that he was a Korean War veteran.
Yep.
Thinking if there was any kind of harboring any feelings, but everything was kind of all positive, and he always wanted to work with him. So it did kind of defied expectations, and how we felt about it. And you're right, like with the relationship between Jacob and Monica, it was always kind of strained, right? It starts the beginning, they didn't have they were always in arguments and fights, and then it kind of devolved from there until the very end. Where they kind of settled to go separate ways until kind of a flip of a switch, a big tragedy happens and then they decide to stay together. But I kind of agree where I thought this movie could have definitely went a different direction. Glad that it didn't. I glad that it had some of a happy ending and not too kind of dark, but yeah, there's always that in the back of my mind I was expecting something. I think you're right. There's like points that foreshadow and that kind of led you to believe like, oh, this can get darker, or this can become even worse, become even more of a tragedy going throughout the film. But things take a different turn, and nothing gets kind of too out of hand and too out of control, which is probably a good thing for a movie like this.
I think it's I think I agree with you guys, kind of like because I thought that would be happening, because I think in the trailer or something they showed the house burning, and then we meet Paul, Will's character, I think, and then we're like, all right, this guy's gonna fucking burn this like house down. Like this guy is like crazy, God-loving white person, and it seems to be really nice, but then he's literally carrying the cross like every Sunday.
Yeah.
Like there's like some like mental, like, he's not fully there. He does an exorcism, and I was like, all right, this guy's gonna burn the house. But it's like ultimately revealed, it's like the house burn was like the burn was an accident, right? It was like good intention from the grandmother of all the characters that we grow and see throughout the film. I think I actually echo sentiments of like, and I actually really enjoy they did it, because I'm sure they could have made Paul burn the thing down, or just whatever, right, with all the foreshadowing. But I'm really glad they didn't, because it really if they did, it would really, I think, dilute like the storytelling, in the sense that like I think I haven't seen a lot of Asian American films in general, story being told, but I think this one in particular tells it from kind of like the parents' point of view, like the zero generation or first generation, whatever you guys the hard term for it, but it's like they moved here to grow, like make their family better, or whatever that meant, from like Korea, from California, here to the South. And then it's told through kind of the main character's eyes, but also really like the kid David, right? Like it really shines in his eyes, right? This is him growing up. This is like, I don't know why mom and dad are like this, but they fight. I don't like them fighting. I don't fit in. Something's a little bit off, but I'm still a kid, right? Like I still like, oh, this first white kid, even the I thought it was really interesting, the interactions with the kids, like the daughter and then the white girl when they were at the church, and then David and the white kid at the church as well. Like they come up to them and say like these stereotype things, right? Like, oh, okay, why is your eyes slanted? I'm gonna start saying a bunch of words. Tell me what language it is. I was like, oh, okay, they're being like really aggressive. Then like a few shots later, they're like really just innocent. They're just like literally saying things. These kids are like, okay, like
Yeah.
It's an innocent question. Like, you don't look like me. You don't look like the other boy, like kids here. Like, what are you doing? It's not malicious. They didn't hate them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were just really pure like questions. And then
Mhm.
like the girl, right? The girl is just like literally like ching chong, and like, oh my god, this thing happened. And then like she just keeps going with all these random ass syllables. And then the other girl's like, oh shit, you said something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like I
Yeah.
think that's like a nice interaction because like I think that happens. I mean,
Mhm.
like, you know, they're like as kids, like not everyone's gonna all kids like are grown, you know, like are fostered in an environment of like hatred towards this like immigrant family. They're just like really curious. They're just like, you
Yeah.
know, I heard these things, is it true? Like I'm just really curious. And I think that was touched upon in this story. And it's just like telling the story from the perspective, because I felt like at least my parents are similar. Like they came to America from a foreign country. And so like telling that from that perspective was really interesting because you could tell it very differently, right? You can tell it from if they would the story could have been told like David growing up or whatever, right? Not like his childhood, but like his adult life after, you know, whatever. But it was a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think you bring a very good point. How this movie doesn't really focus. I mean, it showcases like racism, right? But it doesn't show like the maliciousness. It just shows this family growing up, and it kind of defies what I expected this movie. I thought this movie would kind of lean into that, but it doesn't. It showcases it, right? But no one's ever, as you said, any like kind of malicious, right? And it's just this story is just about this family growing up, right, in this rural South, and it also kind of defies what we think of an Asian American family or Asian family living in the United States, right? They're going to a rural farm. You don't really hear that, or you don't really see that in any kind of media or kind of talking to people, right? It's usually when immigrants come here, they live in the city, which Jacob had, right? He lived in California and then Seattle, right? Or they're working in a kind of like in a condensed area, maybe like in Chinatowns. But here, this is a family that's being raised in or living up in a rural area, which no one ever expects. But it's different to see this kind of dynamic happen, right? And that's also very, very interesting. Just to focus on this family, and then when we see them interact with the town, no one is ever, I guess, as you said, no one was malicious. There's no acts of like to ostracize them or to isolate them or like to make them feel different. It's just trying. There are points like there are these microaggressions, right? But no one's ever like trying to make them feel bad or trying to drive them out of town, right? It's just this is all just them experiencing growing up. But again, the story then touches upon that, but also just again mainly focuses on the family, which I liked, just to see how these kind of this family grows and raised, and there are points where I think everyone can kind of relate to, maybe not everything, but just points of how an Asian family kind of raise up, kind of is raised as a child, and how the parents interact with each other, and then poverty as well. So it definitely, I think, this movie kind of did something different in terms of how it touched on Asians in society, but also just being a story focused on an Asian American family is just very different and refreshing, I would say.
Yeah. I think. Yeah. So I definitely don't fault what David is fitting because the little kid is David and our guest is David today. But
Classic name.
what a good name.
Yeah, what a solid name.
How
You won that award.
yeah, it's very fitting for today's discussion. But yeah, going back to the conversations with the children and the church, I don't fault the children at all. Like I said, they're just curious. I think it's just curiosity. I don't think there was like any malice or anything like that. It was just like they were having a conversation, trying to get to know each other. And at the end, like the children, the Korean children were fine with it. They were like, and like even David made a new friend with, I forget his name, the other kid, like the white boy who like I forget his name. But yeah, it was. I think that was I think that was fine. Like it wasn't like, I think it was like intended to show that like even though it could be implied that it's like racist, like it's not like it's not like any like malicious. There's no like, the intent is not malicious, and I think they portrayed that pretty well. And yeah, so it's also interesting to see that like them growing up because they moved from California to Arkansas, right? So it's not like we see them adapting to like a new to a new culture in the United States, right? It's not like they directly moved from South Korea to the U.S. and you see them adapting. It's like they're still first generation. I think that's like what the first group to immigrate into the U.S. But it's like they're immigrating from like the city to the country, but still within the U.S., which is like a pretty interesting concept because, yeah, you don't often see this type of movie where like, especially in like, you know, in older times, usually when you think of an immigrant family, they move to the city, right? But in this case, they're like moving to the countryside. So it's like, I think in terms of, I haven't seen any other previous movies like that showcase that side of like moving to somewhere very rural. So it provides a pretty interesting perspective. And I think even though the movie was like focused on the Jacob and Monica, like the husband and wife, I think it also equally focused on like David as well. I think David was a very like prominent character. Even with his relationship with his grandmother, I think that was like a really big sort of like climactic scene. Because there's kind of like two subplots going on, like the farm and the family with the husband and wife, and then David's health is also another subplot with his heart being weak. And I think both are sort of resolved at the end. There's two climaxes at the end. One of which is the fire that burns down the farm, like the produce, and the other is David like running after his grandmother, like being able to run for the first time. That was a very powerful scene. It was a very interesting from a storytelling perspective. It's very interesting because usually from what I've seen before, there's usually only like one climax for the main plot of the movie or whatever series that you're watching.
Right.
There might be other subplots, but they kind of get resolved before like the climax of the movie. And in this case, it seemed like there were like two climaxes. Like the two subplots kind of like intertwined and they sort of like intersected at the same time. And they both were like they both happened around the same time, which is pretty interesting to see kind of how that was executed from like a storytelling perspective. Because I can't think of many examples where there are like essentially like two climaxes that happen where both subplots or both, I guess, plots in a sense got resolved simultaneously. And I thought that was pretty interesting, just from a storytelling perspective, because it like one went into the other essentially.
Well, kind of. I feel like I mean, yes, there was two climaxes because there were definitely two subplots right going on. But I feel like it was kind of in a way because usually when you have multiple subplots, right, they all kind of meet together and converge at one point. And this is and here it's kind of the same thing, right? They call it all the subplots kind of converge right at the fire, right? It's kind of it was all kind of at the same area. Yes, they take place in different settings, right? But the reason, right, the cause for these resolutions all was the kind of the same area, right? It's all because of the fire that everything kind of came together. And I feel like this is kind of the same kind of element, right? Yes, there was just two subplots, but I don't think it was just like two different climaxes. I think it's just all just one climax, and it all just kind of led into because of the fire, everything was able to tie up together nicely. And two subplots. I think I kind of want to disagree on the second subplot of the one being about David's heart. I think it's more about him trying to accept his kind of Korean identity, or even going maybe a little further, trying to just accept his grandmother, right? Just because throughout the film there was this conflict between David and his grandmother, right? Because he always felt like she shouldn't be here, didn't like her, how she treated him, didn't like how she smelled of Korea and what she was doing. He was kind of very resentful, right? He kind of accepts her when when she tells him that you don't have to go to heaven, and they sleep together in the same bed. But then it kind of goes back once she gets the stroke, and there kind of a conflict where the family is separated. He blames her again, but then it goes back then, to the climax where he runs, right, where he defies, becomes a young kid where he was always being held back, but this time he breaks free, runs, and tries to stop the grandma, and he does this because he wants to get the grandma back, and because he tells her, no, go back home, let's go back to go back home, the other way, the other direction. So I think that's the main conflict. The heart thing, I think, is just another aspect, another element of the story that another characterization for David, but I don't think it's the main conflict or the main subplot throughout the film, or the second subplot. But I think again, everything kind of converges, and then the first subplot is obviously the conflict between Jacob and Monica, and in how they fighting over the farm and the success of it, and how Jacob is trying to get the farm successful. They break up, but then the farm goes on fire, and they try to be together after that. But I just want to put that aside out there about talking about the different subplots and the resolutions for those.
I think like personally, I think overall plot and resolution of the film left me wanting like it's felt unresolved to me. I think it's interesting to check my own like gauge, because I'm like, okay, if I watch this, it's like, what kind of lens am I watching this movie through, right? Like, so like when you watch different types of movie, you expect different types of things. If you watch like thriller, psychological thriller, you're like, okay, I'm into like intellectual, like picking up like clues and stuff. If I'm watching like a romantic comedy, I'm like just here for just like a fun time, a laugh. But it's even in general this I guess it's a drama, right? This Minari maybe. So like it's a drama, and I'm like, okay, like there is drama in this movie, and then there are these plots like you talk about, like the main plot with the farm, and the other plot with like a lot of plots moving around. But I think it's the most interesting part of the story is the storytelling aspect from a different perspective that it doesn't even shine like a lot on. The sense Austin brought up the term microaggressions. I'm not sure if people know what microaggressions are in general, and it didn't even like talk about microaggressions a lot, right? Never once in the movie there was like, this guy's this guy is being microaggressive. Like, so we're talking about specifically the kids, that there was these tiny microaggressions. They're not even intentional, and microaggression I feel like is too strong of a word even for like kids to be using, or like to label these interactions. But particularly like those like kid interactions, when they were doing that, this really, I think the movie shined in those small details that like just tell a story. Because overall I don't think the plot was like really like captivating, I would say. If it was like from a different cast, or from like, I guess even not about the Asian American race, like I think I have like own personal stakes, and like looking at it, like being really interested, because it shows like, oh, like, is that how my dad felt? Like, oh, I kind of see like where this kid is coming from. Like, oh, like it really resonated, and like really appreciated like a story that's similar to what I like kind of like acknowledge like it's being shown. And I think that's the really great things about this particular type of storytelling. Not necessarily like the plot was like, oh, okay, it was like a really great, they know the house is going to get burned down by the grandmother. Damn, like that's well played, grandmother. Like, like I just think like it's the tiny things that like really portray the stories, and like just how common it is. The story could be like for multiple Asian Americans, not even just Korean. But it doesn't harp on those facts. It's like, hey, like these stuff just happen, and it's like the tiny things. Like if I was watching from a different cultural perspective, I would never have picked up on it. Like just looking like at other ethnic movies or whatever, like just not like the classic American movie. It's just like really interesting to get shined into like a different perspective.
Right. Yeah. Firstly, there's someone in chat who says hi. We have someone who kind of comes back. Mariam says hi. They're asking how is everyone doing. I'm doing well. I think we're all doing well. Know, Austin, David.
Weather's getting better.
Weather's getting better?
Yeah, well,
it's cloudy today.
Yeah. Well, it was sunny yesterday.
Sunny yesterday. That's true. But yeah, thanks for asking, Miriam. Thanks for joining us in the stream again. Yeah, watching this movie called Minari, very recent movie. So
It's in theaters.
it is in
It was
theaters.
released last month.
It's in theaters. You can also watch it on streaming services like YouTube, Amazon Prime, to name a couple.
Wow,
But
are you
yeah.
getting sponsored, Patrick?
I'm not getting sponsored. I'm just advertising. Would you like to sponsor me, please?
Fool. Cool.
Yes, the 2 viewers in
Email to
chat.
them right after. The email requesting
Great.
$1 to the Venmo.
Great coverage. Oh yeah, I'm gonna request $1. I'm just kidding. But yeah, So it's interesting. I will say I do want to talk about the sort of like more so like the what you mentioned, David, in terms of like the significance of this film. The thematic significance and the impact that this film can have, or will have. So it's fairly interesting because this film kind of reminds me of another film that I not recently watched, but like watched a couple years ago, The Farewell. I don't know if you guys
heard
have
about that.
read.
I've never seen that.
Okay.
I have not watched it yet.
Sure. That film is very different from this film, but like it's also about sort of like the main character being Asian American, and she flies back to China because her grandmother is like in poor health, and it's sort of like the whole film is sort of like in Chinese, sort of subtitles, English subtitles, but in terms of like relatability, like for Asian Americans who have sort of like grown up, even like the second generation, like being kids or children of like immigrants, or you're just being, I guess, like understanding like where your parents are coming from. For those parents who are like first generation, like immigrated to the U.S., it's very relatable and it's very impactful in that sense because of the relatability. But for those who aren't, who may not be like Asian American, who may not be children of first generation immigrants, like it may not like be as relatable. And I wonder if like because it's not as relatable, the film isn't as impactful, because like you said, the story itself isn't very enticing per se. It's a very simplistic story, and the resolution itself is very, it happens. I wouldn't say it's
very
like
quick. I say
it's quick, and it
I wouldn't
does
say it's not impactful though. I don't think that's the choice of words I would use, because could you expand on that? I cut you off, Patrick. I think you said that the movie was and reach a broader audience, so it might not be impactful. But
okay, so basically, so would you guys say, like, if you were to replace the cast, like let's say it was, instead of Asian American, it was a white family, and they moved from the city to rural in 1980s, and you saw this movie again, like, would you think that this movie would be as impactful?
No, that definitely not. I don't think it would be impactful in that sense. So like that's why I said, I was alluding, like I don't think the plot is like mind blowing or like, oh wow, like dang, good job, grandma, or whatever, right? Like it's just like the subtlety of like having the representation there, because I think we all alluded to at the beginning was like, oh, this was like a different movie, like we've never seen this kind of story told. And I think stories being told is really impactful. As a movie, this like black and white, I'm sure there are better movies, I guess, but like just having that representation there and having stuff that's seen I can relate to, I think I really enjoyed it. But again, like I don't think like it might be harder to relate to if you're not like of a similar background.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's what I'm going out with, because I feel like this movie may not be like, there are universal themes in this movie, but I don't know if like I'm not entirely sure if one can appreciate the complexities of the movie without having experienced it themselves. But so I think like it's very niche in a sense. Like this movie is sort of niche to the Asian American community. which is fine. I think that's perfectly okay. It just I guess in some sense it just I wouldn't say it's like restricting to the grander audience. It's just more so like the widespread universal audience may not be able to appreciate it as much, which is like to me like I don't know. I wish like I appreciate I more so appreciate movies that are like more universal. Like basically anyone of any identity can appreciate it, can take something away from it. And I think this movie
Yeah.
you can take something away from it. It's just maybe not as like impactful for that person if they don't have that background.
Well, I still
Um,
think it's all about kind of like showing the representation, but also trying to show this story from a different lens, right? So it shows it a lens from an Asian American family, right? So
Yeah.
this is kind of different, where someone who is not of that identity can still take a look and see like this is what they're growing up, what they're experiencing, the troubles they're going through, the kind of cultural clash that this family is going through that might not have been maybe prevalent from someone of a different ethnic identity. So from here, I think this is something that is kind of eye opening in a way for someone who maybe not have experienced the same thing, just to be able to see a different culture, right? To see a different perspective. So again, it's just from I think here, it's just from a different lens, right?
It is from a different lens.
How to show the family.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe if it's from a different, maybe from a Caucasian family, it might be different from a black family, it might be different, but from here now we see the conflicts and the challenges that an Asian family has to go through, right? So a lot of it is about identity, right? How they kind of reconcile being American with how they growing up to trying to fit with Korean traditions, but also just this Korean family just having the same kind of challenges that any farmer rural farmer might have, right? It's the same thing, kind of saying like, oh, there's no water anymore, or
they don't want to pay for a well.
Right, exactly. Don't want to pay for it. Yeah, don't want to pay for a well.
Might be more Korean American.
The Dallas, supply or buyer, kind of cut
Canceling.
them off. Just
Last minute,
do that.
Yeah.
So these are challenges that regular farmers probably have, but now we get to see it. How it affects this family. But that's kind of like the surface of it. But then if we go deeper, it's just about like this lens from this family, how they interact, how Monica is trying to is kind of isolated and alone, trying to make it through this poverty, trying to find friends and family, tries to go through a church, but there's no really enough Koreans to form a church, or everyone who's out there doesn't want to be part of a church, and just when they're at the church, they kind of feel isolated, right? Even though they're trying to be at a church to mingle, they still felt isolated and alone, right? The mother was kind of not interacting, or when she was interacting, she kind of tried to pull herself out from that conversation and then go back to her mother, right? And then but meanwhile we have the kids who are actually just talking with the other kids, right? But it's the parents who are kind of isolated and alone and just not be able to maybe adapt, or and there's that language barrier too, right? That's probably why. But I think it's just again this different lens of how this family is going through the same challenges that any other family could have gone through, and I think that's maybe what makes it a little bit more engaging. But I kind of feel like this plot is just about a farmer. Like if you just take it from the base, it's about a farmer trying to make their way up, and that's kind of been done and seen. But now we get to see it from a different lens.
I think I have to disagree with Patrick about like the impactfulness or the widespread of this. Even from myself, I think I did something contradictory before. I think it's not. I don't think it's actually too niche in the sense of the appeal. Because have you guys ever heard of so it's on Netflix, this limited series called Unorthodox? Have you guys heard of that?
No.
I have not. No.
Just really quickly. So Unorthodox is a limited 6-episode series on Netflix, and it talks about the unorthodox Jewish life, which is basically the unorthodox Jews are a subtype of Jews that are just really intensive in their studies and how they go about reading scripture, and they maintain the Jewish heritage and culture. So they're the really intense Jews. It's say the least. If you're an unorthodox Jew, you're just really, really, really Jewish. And so as a person who just watched that series with no stake in that culture, I thought it was really interesting see their culture and be like, oh, okay, is that how it really is? Like that seems like really wrong. Oh, is that how people feel in that culture? That seems really suffocating. Oh, there's stuff like that. So I don't necessarily even think that like it was a niche audience. It was just it was a well told story from like a different perspective, or like from someone
Right. Right.
someone that doesn't know that culture at all. So like I don't think Minari, we like, again, like I don't think the plot is like phenomenal or like mind breaking, but I just think overall I think it's a well told story that has subtleties. And then again, I think one of you guys said it's maybe hard to appreciate and pick up on those subtleties, but like the fact that like those are there, like and you're watching it, like from an outside perspective, I would be like, oh, that's interesting, right? As a non-Korean myself, I watched the movie and I was like, oh, like I've heard of that card game, like oh, I've seen that thing, like oh, I know like Korean grandmas are just like, or this grandmas in general can be like this, and then so I think it like resonated and was educational from like that sense. It was like, okay, this is someone's story. I'd never heard of it. Like I don't know, I thought Jews, I never like learned about this thing, or like Indian caste system. If you watch like a movie about that or whatever, right? It's just like, oh, is this a thing? And then you go read upon it, and then you're like, okay, kind of understand where someone else is coming from, and then you kind of understand them better.
Yeah, I completely agree. This movie is not niche. It's just it has themes and whatnot, stories that everyone can relate to, and just people of the Asian identity can probably pick up and just say like kind of like go, oh yeah, this is true, or this is relatable, and that makes us kind of empathize more with the movie or connect more with the movie. But I agree, right, that this movie is a story that anyone can appreciate, but it just shows, again, as I said before, just different lens.
I think if you like, I guess what I said about like being niche is more so like it being like you may not appreciate it as much, but you can still appreciate it. Like there's like different thresholds of appreciation for it. Like I guess I feel like if I weren't like Asian American, I watched this, I would be like, there are things like universal parts, like the farmer ruling, like moving from city to rural, trying to get a hold of like reconciling with your grandmother. Like this could very much have been like maybe an immigrant family from a different area of the world, like Europe or Africa or even the Middle East, South America. Like it could have been like any like immigrant family story, right? But I think the sort of detail and nuances with the film is like more, I guess, like maybe as like an Asian American, I guess I can appreciate those like small nuances more. Especially even if you're Korean, I bet if you're Korean, you would appreciate it a lot more. Like the card game, the language, the details of the sets on the decorations within the house and all that stuff. The metal chopsticks, like that's like stuff that as a Korean you would appreciate way more than like even like me being Chinese American, right? Like I don't know that card game. I don't use metal chopsticks at the dinner table. I don't speak Korean, so like I think that like there are things that like, yeah, it's universal for sure. And but I think that like to really appreciate it on a higher like IQ brain level, like you really need to be in that, like have grown up in that setting, I feel like.
Or watch it multiple times.
What? Why would you wait, why watch it? Why watch?
I have to go in like 2 minutes, but no, I was just joking. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to appreciate it at the high IQ level just to like appreciate someone's story, right? Because
yeah, I agree with that. It can be, you can appreciate. I'm just saying like the finer nuanced details.
Oh yeah. Also, I don't think you ate with metal chopsticks is because you're not Asian enough. Because I felt like my uncles eat with metal chopsticks. Sorry.
Oh no, I
metal chopsticks.
Okay, yeah, I say metal chopsticks because I've always eaten with wooden chopsticks, and I know like whenever I fly whenever if I'm in Korea or if I fly Korean like go to a Korean store or fly Korean airlines, it's always it's like usually metal chopsticks or metal silverware compared to like
I haven't picked
when
up on that
in
detail.
China.
Now I gotta rewatch it.
Because when I go to China, we eat with like either wooden chopsticks or porcelain, like the little like porcelain chopsticks, not like
Oh
metal.
yeah.
The metal is metal. I very much associate with like Korea
Good
because
taste
I've
to
seen
I
it
think.
a lot within that environment. But yeah, anyway, sorry. That's just something that.
I gotta go.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. Sorry for starting late.
No worries.
I think I've never heard of Tiger Tail. I put it in the chat. I think it's really interesting as well because it's a similar film, but like told from a different perspective, not from, and it's about like Taiwanese American. So this is a different film, but maybe you can compare and contrast similar films. But I'm not sure what you guys do. But thanks for having me. I'll reach out with an email, send me a Venmo, add revenue.
Quick, David, before you leave, rating. How would you rate this movie? Quick, out of 1 out of 10.
I 1 out of 10. I mean, rating is really subjective.
It is subjective, so
I
just
would say it's 7.5 to 8.
All right, 7.5.
I would watch it, but I don't really rewatch a lot of movies.
Okay.
And this is no exception, so I will not rewatch this.
Okay.
But like I thought it was good to have it told.
Okay.
Like because I felt like it was a very different type of movie.
Okay.
I appreciated that.
And would you recommend this movie to the general audience? Those of you who are like those people who are interested in watching it, anyone who's interested in like watching some sort of movie.
Yeah, I think it's a really well told story from a different cultural perspective. I think you should set your expectations for like I mean we obviously spoiled it a lot, so like I hope you're not watching it for spoilers or something. Like, it's not, I mean it's just like a normal family trying to make it in America as immigrants, and it's not like a really captivating plot. I think it's just a well-told story, and I just really want to praise Dave, the little kids, like his scene where the mom. This is so funny when the mom was like, "Oh, okay, next time he pees in his bed and his incontinence." And so the mom was like, "Next time you try to pee, just squeeze your cheeks really hard before you pee to make sure you're not in the dream." He literally does that in the next scene. Like, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? And then he just pees. It's just. I think it's well deserved for that kid. But I'm gonna leave now. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for joining, David. See ya. Where were we?
The whole representation. I think there's just nuances that people who are Asian can probably identify, but I kind of think as we kind of already touched on, just it's a movie that everyone can kind of see and appreciate and just take a look at, just because of how, again, it's from a different perspective that they might not have even thought of previously,
right?
Ever think of before.
I mean, I think for the most part, I think like I said, anyone can appreciate this film for what it is. It is eye-opening, but it could open the door to like being more curious about the Asian American experience. Another thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was like near the end, part of the climax, the fire burning down the produce, like the farm, like all the produce. How that played out in terms of symbolism or symbolically, because typically, whenever there's like a sort of a transition, like just through like my experiences with watching films, is that typically when there's like a big transition, a cleansing of sorts, like a moment of revelation where it's like cleansing, it's like a something to learn from, to go forward and move forward with. Usually it involves some sort of rain, like water, like it just like downpours, and it's like oh my gosh, like I am a changed person. This is like a changed life. And you see that at the end, after the produce is all burned up, one might think that like that's the end, like that's for sure going to be like it's all over, right, for the farm. But It turns out that they plant themselves. They commit. Like the family is not broken up. Monica stays with Jacob, and they commit to the farm. Like by like they're looking for the new water well, and they plant the stone down to indicate like this is where we're going to set up where the water is going to come from. So that fire, in a sense, was almost like a cleansing, like because before, like they had tacitly implied that they were going to break up, that Monica was going to move back to the city with the children. Ways. Jacob was going to stay here at the farm and try to make it work.
Right.
And then that fire happened, and it's like that's the sense of clarity. That's almost like the sense of clarity that happened. That 180 where it's like it was very heartwarming to see that Jacob went in and rushed in to try to like salvage as much produce as he could. Right, that makes sense. He's committed, and then Monica went in to help him, which was very endearing. And then I think she collapsed from the smoke or something, or she wasn't she needed help, and so right. Jacob was basically saved her, committed to finding her, and essentially all the produce was burned down anyway. So I that was a very heartwarming, no pun intended, because it was literally a fire in there. It was a heartwarming moment because it was it was as if in that experience they kind of reconciled with each other. She went in to help him, and then he went to help her, and even though it didn't work out, they did it together. And they experienced that together. And although this cleansing experience that would usually symbolize with rain happened in a fire, it worked. I think it worked out.
Yeah. It's kind of like they burned down the previous kind of animosity, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you're right. This is a different kind of change. You could have been there could have been rain and to wash everything, but but the fire was just a little bit more aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Especially after the scene previously where they decided to break up, where we thought it's over.
Yeah.
I always felt this kind of switch, especially it was this switch to the fire, and it kind of reversed all the what happened previously in the scene before, and then it kind of went to the end. I felt like it all happened very quickly. This sequence, I kind of wanted it to kind of be a little bit more dragged out, or a little bit more, have a little bit more conversation about it, just because it seems so sudden, and then we kind of see this kind of montage, he plants it. His wife is there, right, which is important to show that she decided to stick with him. To stay with him and to have that to go forward with this farm, even though even before she said she didn't like the idea, she wanted to move out to California, but now she's like, what, I'll stay here. But the fire probably had a good part, and we had the scene with the family all together, sleeping together, on the floor. That definitely shows that this family's together, staying together, and wants to be together.
It also showed the pictures of the family together right before that. So.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
But I felt like there was just no communication. I kind of felt for me, I kind of wanted a little bit more interaction in that Monica wanting to stay instead of having being shown that. But again, I felt like it all kind of happened really quickly from that point all the way till the end. Right, it was a very short amount of time. But you're right. That fire was kind of the impetus, right? You kind of just kind of changed the direction, because we all thought, the family's gonna the parents are separating, the family is gonna be split apart, right? The farm is gonna do well and everything's gonna happen well, but then we had the fire happen, which kind of took away. It kind of not I want to say cheated, right? But it's this family is gonna fall apart. This family is gonna separate, but this is fire, right? Because now David has lost everything. He has nothing, right?
Yep.
But within this fire, he showed that he had prioritized his family. First he prioritized the farm. Right? He went back into the fire, trying to get all the produce out. But then his wife comes back in, right? Even though she hated the farm and didn't want it to happen, right? She still goes in there to help him save what he can. And then when she goes down, he decides to abandon the fruits, not the vegetables, and look for her and help her get out of the fire. And they kind of accept, this is it. There's nothing else, and he doesn't have the farm anymore. He has nothing, right? So how does he start over? He decides to stay there, right? And then his family decides to stay with him, which he's probably pretty lucky to have that happen. Even just before he decided like, oh, in the worst of times we break apart, in the best of times we can stay together. But here it's now all the worst of times, and they still decide to stay together. I think it's probably a big probably a big impetus for that was probably Monica deciding like, I wanted to stay with him and help him, and it's probably a big character, but we don't really get to see any of her interaction or her thoughts on that. But it's probably a big decision for her because she definitely wanted to move out and be back in the city where there's probably more Koreans and whatnot. But she decides to stay, especially after the fire where now David has nothing and has to build everything back up. But we see that he's or at least it's kind of implied that he's doing all right now afterwards, right? Because he decides to finally go to the water diviner and use their American way to find the well water. And well, does it work? We'll have to see. But he kind of but now he has his family back together again.
Yep.
Right. So I feel like the fire kind of cheated in that way because we all thought it's fall apart. But again, he burns everything down. He has nothing, and the family is now reunited.
Yeah, and besides, who needs water when you have Minari? It can grow in any climate. I did like the ending with the Minari with the creek. I kind of wish the grandmother was there with them. I feel like because she was the one who like started it all. I don't know if maybe she died. I don't know. Who knows? I think I do agree that it was quick. It just like went from 0 to 100. Kind of in that sense. Like I wish there was like more tension build up. Like you got to see that after the doctor's appointment for David's heart. When Jacob brought in the produce, into the doctor's office, sort of to I guess to the audience and to Monica symbolize that he was choosing farm over family. I think the build up to the climax could have been like more. There could have been more substance to that, but I think the climax itself and the resolution was fine. I don't think there needed to be words. There needed to be like any per se expression of like from Monica saying like I want to stay. I feel like that was already like it was shown pretty well. Like it was shown like it was a matter of like showing not telling. Like from the audience perspective, they went on the shots of like the family sleeping on the floor. They went on the shots of like the family within the pictures, and that's sort of like to the audience that already implies that they're going to stay together. Like that's like they don't really need any dialogue per se. There doesn't just need to be any interaction between the characters themselves, for me at least, because I knew from then on that like they're going to stay. And I think that part of the resolution was actually like I thought that was fairly well done. Just because like it was succinct and it didn't need to like. There didn't need to be like some like over embellished like oh my god like dialogue, right? It was just like very like it was just simply shown, and heavily implied. So like, I thought it was fine, but I do agree in the sense that like it did happen very quickly. That like the climax just happened. And I do agree that I wish there was like more of a build up toward that. But yeah, I think.
I mean, I kind of feel like again, as I said before, I feel like not that it's cheating, right? But it's just like they were kind of resolved, right, to split up, right? And now after this fire, I mean, the happened, they go into the fire and save it, and now they're just like, okay, yeah, we're gonna stay on the farm. I feel like.
Right, but
like a 180, and it's just like I want to stay now. But now they have nothing. Why are they committing to the farm when going back to the
okay. The reason that they're staying is from that fire scene. That fire scene when they were saving each other, like Jacob went in and then Monica followed and tried to like she didn't even try to like usher Jacob to like leave the farmhouse. Yeah. She helped him with the vegetables. Which implies that he was on her side. And then when Monica stopped, like I think when she needed help, Jacob didn't save the vegetables first. He went for her first.
Right.
So it was a very like that to me was a very impactful scene because in that moment, to me it was like they had chosen family, like they were committed to each other, even though like everything was like literally on fire, like set to fire. they had chosen each other over like the farm. Like Jacob had basically
Right.
not reconciled. He chose family over farm. And Monica, like they met in the middle. They essentially met in the middle, in a sense. They compromised. They reached a compromise.
I think it's just more that they were committed to each other. I guess you're right. Like that fire had a lot of symbolism, right? Everything was a fire, and they were committed to each other, right? She was committed to helping him, still go with his dream, and then he was like, you know what, this dream doesn't matter. I want to have my family instead. So they both ran into the fire, and when times
when literally life like
literally times everything. Yeah, where everything was like go in hell and whatnot. When times were tough and they were really like everything was burning around. They decided that you're right. I guess you're right. Yeah, that fire probably had a lot more significance than I gave it credit for.
Like they didn't have to like.
She didn't have to go back in, right?
She didn't have to go back in. It's like they like all of it was shown through action. Like to me, like the action spoke for itself, and that's why I think it was fine because it was like they didn't need to like have this like dialogue because like the words themselves were just like so much. They were just like the actions speak much louder than the words than any words could have been because literally they were in a life and death situation. Yeah, and it was clear like how each of them were doing. Like Monica helped Jacob helped Monica. Like they were like even they were together. They went through it. Even if everything burned down, they got through it together, and that was the point. Like it was family.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and then going back to the grandmother and David, Sunja and David, I think I agree with you when you mentioned that it was not just about the heart; it was more about like David accepting his grandmother, and wanting his grandmother to be back, basically in a sense like keeping the family together. So, I mean, I think you said it. Yeah, you had a really good point about that, and I agree with it. So,
I kind of want to expand more on Sunja, right? Like her role in the story. I think it's kind of how she's kind of this kind of outsider, kind of right, who from South Korea goes in, only speaks Korean.
She's like the act like the straight from South Korea to rural Arkansas. Like that is like I can't even imagine like how. And she seemed to adapt pretty well actually. She was like watching wressling and drinking Mountain Dew, and she's like, I was like, man, I was okay,
This grandmother's so sympathetic, and I kind of had there's a lot of relatable moments, just like how she like treats her grandkids, right, and how how she has like broken English, can only pick up certain words. Just I remember like how there's this one scene where Dave was like, oh yeah, she doesn't even she's not even like other grandmothers, right? And Sinjo was like, oh, like grandma, yeah, that's good. That was pretty funny, how she picks up words, but it's just and how she kind of pushes David to be a kid, right, and just trying to live and but in her own kind of different way. But she definitely seems like an outsider plan, but it definitely has a big role in introducing kind of this Korean identity to this whole movie, right? She kind of brings different foods, kind of acts differently, or has makes the family act differently around each other, right? And in the end too, right, when the whole family's sitting together, she's just there, staring at them and taking a look at this is the family that's falling together. But it's very interesting how she's kind of like this outsider. But she's still part as part of this family, but still she's kind of this outside element who brings different change to the family and how they interact with each other and how things are going. And she literally starts the fire, right? Kind of starts that whole
she's the impetus. She's the harbinger of change.
The agent of change. Right?
The agent of change.
She comes in. She gets moves. She moves in, and David kind of becomes resentful, but he soon learns to accept and love his grandmother, and then also the kind of drives the parents kind of even further in terms of like, she, even though she's there, the mother still kind of feels lonely, right?
Yeah.
And then tries to feel grateful into this whole piety and whatnot. And then again at the end with the fire, so she does a lot of she's there to set up a lot of the story and helps progress the story. Forward.
I think it's kind of ironic that she out of I think everyone, she seemed to be the most like open to like moving to rural. She seemed to be the most like happy moving to like the rural Arkansas from South Korea. Like she seemed to be like perfectly fine with it. Like she and like people were like, "Oh my god, it must be like so hard for you to like," and she was just like like her scenes are just like her watching like wrestling on TV and like trying out like Mountain Dew and everything. It just seemed so like the irony of it just seems so amusing.
Planting Minari whatever she wants.
Right? Yeah, exactly. She's like
Creek, and Anne was like, "You shouldn't be there. The snakes."
There's snakes.
Grandma was like, "It's okay.
It's okay." Yeah, exactly. it's like okay. I think it's like almost like it's very interesting. It's because like I kind of see like her, like when my grandmother moved to the U.S. to help take care of me, help raise me, like for her it was like when she first moved to the U.S. it was like there were so many things that were so different, but a lot of things were like at first glance it was like very very nice because there were so many luxuries, like open, like there was like so much open space, just explore. There's like TV, and there's like these like very like things that we take for granted now that they like the older generation, like 2 generations above us, especially growing up, in that time period, like they never had these luxuries. Like for instance, like my grandma never grew up with TV. Like she never really like, I guess, really experienced it until, well, I think they have it in China, but like it was more so like we had a big TV and she was like, oh my gosh. It's just like these small things that are like very interesting, and I think like I can sort of like see that in the perspective of like maybe like Sunja, the grandmother, is that like she's seeing these like she views, even though it's like very different, rural Arkansas like has to be very different from like South Korea, but like she sees like the very simple things as like almost like maybe not luxuries, but like as like a good thing. And it's very, I don't know, I just in some sense it's like relatable because I kind of like maybe like my grandma kind of saw that.
I think she's just she's happy like being in a better area, but also because
and also with family
right?
too.
That's probably a big portion, right? She's there with her family now because before it was kind of stated that she had no other relatives, right? And the grandmother was probably alone back in Korea, but now she's with family and able to interact, especially with grandkids. She hasn't seen David at all, or apparently never met David before, or was like really when he was like really young, right? But now get to see all these grandchildren interact, and I think she's happy with that. But you're right. I think it's very interesting to see how like the grandmother was pretty. I mean, I don't think she really cared. Right? She didn't really have to interact with Western society, like the American society, right? She was just interacting with family, right? The rest of the family had to interact with the American society, and that's probably why they kind of like had to try to fit in.
She did interact. She went to church with them like a couple of times, like once.
She did, but at the same time, she didn't really care, right? They're like she like when they were doing the donations, right? She took the $100 bill back, right? When they were talking,
I remember that
at the party afterwards, right? She didn't really interact, right? It was we show this perspective, the mother trying to interact, couldn't speak English, and then she goes back to her mother, Sunja, right? So the grandmother really didn't really care, like even if she interacted with the rest of society, she's like she had no care in the world, or she had no stake in it, right? And she was just there. She was sleeping at church as well, right? She's like, yeah, I'm here, but I'm here for my family. She's here with the family, right?
Yeah.
But the rest of the family had to interact and had stake, with American side, right? Jacob obviously had to, sell. It was on the farm, try to, try to become, successful and achieve the American dream, right? And he had this conflict, and Monica, was in a world where she felt like she didn't belong or was very lonely. And then there's Jacob and Anne who was just trying to fit in as kids, right? Trying to reconcile what they were growing up as, part of American identity with this Korean identity that's being brought in with the grandmother coming and living with them. So everyone was kind of unhappy just because they had to reconcile, with their own values and their own, way of life that they're used to or were comfortable with.
Yeah.
With how change happened with now that they're in America or in rural part of Arkansas. Their grandmother though was just like she's imported there, but she doesn't have to interact with the rest of American society. She's there just so she's there for her family, and the main interaction is just with her family. I think that's why she's showing a little bit happier.
Yeah.
I
agree with that.
And then
Yeah.
right, so I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like she didn't have to like really interact. Like it was, I think the happiness came from the family aspect. I think that's probably, you're right. I think that's probably like the biggest thing because the mother, Monica did mention that her mother, like the grandmother, basically didn't have anyone. Like her dad died when like young.
In the Korean War.
The Korean War, that's right. And that's why she was like an only child, something like that. No aunts, no uncles, no siblings. That's a good point.
And another I wanted to bring up another big change or another part of progress is when Sunja gets the stroke, right?
Yes.
Because
I want to talk. I kind of want to talk. Yes, go on.
Yeah, so we see resolution before, or at least what we thought was resolution, right, between David and Sunja, right?
Yeah.
Because they sleep together, and she's like, "Oh, you don't have to go to heaven, you stay here."
Right.
Well, who would tell his child such a thing? And he relaxes him, and sings some kind of a lullaby, which really
Minari.
a lot. But it's just like she kind of cares for him, and we see that he finally feels comfortable. Right, we thought there's a resolution, but then the next day there's this kind of like she gets a stroke. Not feeling not feeling well. We all think things bad things will happen, but later on we kind of see Debbie become resentful because when that happens, the family just decide the mother Monica is like, oh, maybe we should go back to California. We can't live here. It's not good. The hospital, the healthcare is probably better somewhere else. And then David gets resentful again, just like, why are you here? You shouldn't be here. Go back to Korea, and he kind of reverts back. It's not until the end where he kind of reconciles again with the grandmother. It's like, no, let's go back home. You are part of this family.
Yeah,
I think that's a big part of it. Change just how kind of we thought there was resolution, but again, it kind of turned around.
Yeah. I do want to talk about that scene a bit where the grandmother was reconciling or consoling the David at night to sort of like tell him that he'll be fine. I think going back to like the very beginning of this discussion where I was talking about how this movie kind of like I always felt like it was going in like not necessarily one direction. I always felt like there was like hints at like a potential direction that this movie could go, but it would like there's like an expectation from this movie perhaps that I had, but like it wouldn't it would go in a different direction. And I think this scene kind of did it pretty well because you would expect that like there would be like David you knew that David had these like health complications, right, with his heart, but we didn't know anything about like the grandmother. We didn't know about Sunja, right? We didn't expect that like there would be like she would have a stroke, of all things, right? Like there was no like implication that she had any sort of previous health problems. So it was like it's very interesting to see that like almost like in a sense like when she consoled her that night, it's like to me it's like. I don't know if I'm just like looking at it very differently, but it's like she took the hit for him, she like maybe there was some sort of divine, it's like she provides some divine protection or something. Like it was like, oh yeah, like David's at risk, but I'm going to like protect you from anything. Like you're not going to die in my arms or whatnot.
Yeah, you're not going to die. Exactly.
Yeah,
she said that.
And it basically like. David wakes up and he sees that the bed is wet and he thinks that it's him, but it's not him, and he realizes that like it has to be the grandmother, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, its grandmother suffered a stroke, like, and David is getting better. It's like almost as if like the grandmother like willed her way into like getting David better. I don't know. It's somewhat interesting to see that.
It is. I think you make a very good point, right? It's kind of symbolic, right? You see that change. The grandma's like, I'm not gonna let you die.
Yeah,
you're right. It kind of feels like she takes it, and I think maybe I don't know, like Korean, but like Chinese, like a lot of superstitious, right, and whatnot.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I think
for
it's
sure.
kind of a big thing. Like, oh yeah, the grandmother, kind of took like the bad, omens and
Oh,
whatnot.
yeah, yeah.
Kind of said it, and happened to her. But now,
Yeah.
her grandson is feeling better, and I think you're right. I think that's a different way, as you said, kind of like. I don't know how prevalent. I know Chinese. It's just like about you're right. Like taking this on, this energy, bad and just and
the
just
bad
like,
chi,
taking the sacrifice. Yeah,
the bad chi. Yeah,
but
like
yeah, I
chi.
think it's very interesting that happened. It kind of was a switch, right? From the son David, having his condition to the grandmother, suffering the stroke. Which she kind of took as you said, took the hit. So I think you're right. I think that's very interesting, and not that it's mystical, but just it's symbolic in the way that the movie kind of portrayed that, and then how us as Asian can kind of identify with that.
And something else that I thought was like kind of a little bit amusing was when Paul, the character's name, he came over to like perform some sort of ritual, I think. Exorcism, yeah. And so grandmother's on the bed, and she's just like staring at the cabinet, and she's saying Minari. Is she saying Minari? I can't, there's a word that she's saying, but like.
But she was just saying something over there,
like over there, like hiding over there. Yeah. So like, I mean, Paul doesn't know like what's like. He doesn't really. He thinks that this is all just like maybe part of like the exorcism thing, and maybe the mother as well doesn't make any sense about it. But from the audience, like why she's saying this, because she's pointing at the drawer that like hit David's leg and caused him to bleed, right?
Yeah.
She's saying it's hiding over there because of the snakes. Like she told David that like, oh yeah, you don't want animals to hide because they're more dangerous. You'd rather see them in plain sight. Because David was throwing rocks at the snake to like get it away.
Yeah.
And so like, at least from my perspective, like the stuff that she was saying wasn't like random, right? It was from recent events.
Right.
And it's like
that's a good point. I never really thought of that. I thought she was just being kind of like hallucinating. Like I thought it was because of the snake, right? That's why I thought she was trying. But you're right. I think with the drawer like hurting David, I never thought of that. That's pretty.
Yeah. So for me, it's like it's really amusing because it's like the mother thinks that like they need to bring in like Paul like as an exorcist to like solve the situation in the room. Like there's like bad, like demons living in the room or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in actuality, it's just because like there's this recent events that like because she's suffered a stroke, like she has impaired speech, and movement and stuff like that. So like she's just thinking about like the more recent memories with David. And it's not because of like some demon per se. It's just that like, that's the way recently what happened. But she can't iterate that. She can't like articulate that because of her health condition. So like it's interesting. It's like funny like almost like a let's slap to all this like exorcism. Like, oh, that's nonsense. Like it's like no, that's actually not exorcism. It's like because you don't know the full story. She can't articulate it. Anyway, I just thought that was hilarious. I thought that was like really like subtly humorous.
I never realized that. Yeah, that's true. That's pretty funny, and that makes a lot more sense now. Now that you said that.
Yeah. Sorry, I wanted to say that because I thought that was just like I thought it was funny. I thought it was humorous.
Good tidbit.
Yeah. But yeah, I think for the most part, I think that's all I kind of wanted to say about the movie. I think we covered like essentially all of it. Oh, one final thing about plot is that the reason they didn't have water was it because Jacob took the water from the county to like he migrated it to his crops. Like he just like.
Yeah. So they ran out of water. He put the water to take the crops, and then I guess payment had they had no more payment, right? So
they were
running out of money. Right? So
okay.
then, when you don't have payment, or you pay for maybe a predetermined amount
of water, and you run out of it.
Okay. Out of water.
That makes sense.
And that is why they ran out.
Yeah. Okay. That's basically. What I wanted.
I also just want to talk about Jacob. Right? He's a big character. Well, obviously the main character.
Yes, yeah.
Just how he pursued kind of like the American dream, and and how that
He's a very prideful man.
He's very very prideful man, right? And I feel like like he's trying to make money and try to work hard, and that's kind of the essence of the American dream, right? Work
also,
hard to make money.
Not only work hard to make money, but also he wants to show his kids that he's a success.
Yeah,
that was also heavily implied because not heavily. He just said that to Monica in the hospital because he basically was like, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life chicken sexing.
Exactly.
He told her
he wants to be something bigger, right?
He
has more ambition, right? He wants to have a farm with a lot of land, right?
Yeah.
And make a lot of money that way. But I feel like it's very interesting to see him try to do that, but also trying to reconcile how he got there, right? I think we kind of see him with the water, trying to do whatever he can. He gets angry when the Dallas doesn't work out, so he has to go to Oklahoma City. But and he brings the vegetables up to the hospital room. But it's just very interesting to see his kind of his determination and just how again how I guess you're right, like how determined and stubborn he is to get that dream, and how he even was willing to sacrifice his family just so he can get it. When all his he was doing this, initially we thought it was because for his family, right? But then he chooses to for his farm, right? I think this is kind of the idea of the American dream of how we get there, and how hard he works for it, and what he's willing to sacrifice to gain that success, right? But at the end, he kind of just. Not that he throws it away, right? He still commits to the farm, but now he kind of reconciles this is for his family. He wants to do it with his family, and there's some things that he has to, kind of do the American way, right? Before he kind of rejected the water diviner, but now he kind of accepts the water, pays the money to have a water diviner there to get the well. He's there, he kind of accepts his family. What sacrifices he does to make in order to gain that American dream, and what he will do to achieve that, right? You can't be all just being cheap and doing all yourself. Now you have to work together with other people, other society, and with your family just to attain it. So I thought it's just interesting to see his transformation of how he tried to achieve that American dream, because initially it is for his overall. It's always about his success, right? His ambition to get his dream and to be something bigger. But we all thought it was because of his family, right? And that's what he was initially doing it for. But then he chooses to farm over the family. But then it goes back again to being together with the family and trying to gain success without sacrificing anybody to gain it. So I think it's just very interesting to see that change in him, and how he the American dream was always there, how it kind of corrupted him, but then how he kind of realized the light and tried to modify it as well.
Yeah. It's always it's a pretty interesting concept. I feel like there's and this is my interpretation of it. In terms of if you compare more I wouldn't say Eastern versus Western values, but I guess maybe talking about more of the American dream versus this the Korean family, is that there's this push and pull between family versus individual within Jacob, I think, particularly.
Yeah.
And whether or not you're doing it just for yourself, or you want to sacrifice your own ambitions to support your family. It's sacrificing one or the other. You can't necessarily have both, but in the end, it kind of compromises in the end. But it's very interesting to sort of see that push and pull within Jacob, because I know that there's a lot of at least in the U.S. there's this really big and some you come here and you want to make things, you want to make it big. It's all about kind of an individual sense.
Yeah.
Individualistic sense versus I know I mean not just in East Asia, but other parts of the world where family is very, and community is very, very important. Very integrated with the cultural aspect within the culture itself. So it's individual versus I don't know, community. Almost. Yeah. I guess maybe I could have expressed it way better, but sort of that conflict. There's always that little nuanced conflict. Anything else you want to discuss about for this film?
Not much. I mean, I guess another thing is I guess religion, right? Do you think religion played any big part in this movie, or was it kind of just like a side? Because I feel like it was kind of prominent in this film. It's not that there's any religious themes, right? At least maybe not that I noticed, but the idea of religion, right? Because obviously Paul is the big example, right? Him, trying to, being religious in a different way, being kind of, fanatical, and then the whole exorcism. But then there's also Monica, who was more, probably, more religious, right? She kind of brings up the idea is there a Korean church, but then told like there's no Korean church because all the Koreans who moved out here, right, moved out here because they wanted to get away from the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the church is kind of prominent. Maybe this is just because the area, probably because of the family is Korean and Koreans, there is big religious component, especially with the expats, and then being in rural Arkansas, probably also a very religious area. So I don't know, maybe it's just because of the setting, or if there's maybe a prominent role in kind of symbolism of religion. But just want to hear your thoughts because I don't know, I'm not too sure. I feel like there probably isn't any religious undertones in this movie. It's just probably more American dream and or just American family growing up through poverty. But I feel like a religion it played a lot more prominent role than I thought in terms of like being there, right? Just having as a characterization for Paul and Monica.
Yeah. Religious undertones. That's a good question. I feel like out of all the family, the only person who was like really religious was Monica. Like no one else kind of like Jacob was like whatever. He kind of like shunned Monica at the end for Paul coming over to do this exorcism because he thought it was like not necessary at all. I don't think he was like really into it. I was like, why is he here? Why does he have to
really into it? I think it's also kind of like this Korean or Asian idea or
like pride.
Saving face, right? Because you have like you're like, oh, you're telling my employee, inviting him over to his house and then telling him that we have these problems. Right, and it looks maybe it looks bad, but I feel like that's why. But I feel like Jacob was never really religious, right? He says, oh yeah, maybe we should go to church, thinking that would make her feel better, right? To make friends and whatnot. But it's not like he wanted to go to church. He tells her like maybe we should go to church to make her feel better. He's not very religious, man. And the whole family's not as
and then the grandmother, of course, isn't like, he's like, what is this nonsense? It's like this nonsense to children. And of course David and Anne, I forget. Anne, right? The daughter and son, they're like, they're just going to church just because it's a family thing. But
to meet people, right? It's just, for Monica, it's like, I think, maybe she's more religious, but also it's a point of socialization, right? She's like, oh, I was in Korean church. Lonely. She wants to just meet other Korean people, have the Korean children play with each other. But I don't know. I feel like maybe they're not much religious undertones, but I feel like religion just had a big part of characterization.
I think it was just more so because of the environment they were in. I don't think there was like prominent. Like they could have been like it was an easy way for them to sort of interact with like the environment. Like for instance, like strangers or like people within the rural community, because church is like a very prominent like community bringer in those sort of environments. So it's like it makes sense. But I don't think it was like there was any, like from my perspective, I don't think there was anything prominently said about like religion in the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, at least I can't think of anything. Maybe there is, but I didn't pick up on it.
Right.
I do kind of wish that because Monica talked that woman, the chicken sex woman, like her coworker.
Oh yeah,
a little bit, and I to me at least, it would have been nice to delve into that more, because I feel like they could have invited each other or talked to each other outside of work. It was just within work, right?
At least be more friend or that interaction, right? Because Monica's kind of say that Monica's lonely, right? She's out here in a world that she can't really relate to. But when she goes to this farm, there's all these other maybe Asians, right? But then there's there's Koreans here.
There's Koreans here.
Some of us here.
There was never really any it never, yeah, never that part never took off
That's
in terms of never was displayed. Maybe it was implied that Monica didn't want to because of the church dialogue. Like she was like, oh yeah, the Koreans here don't go to church because we were escaping it. And then Monica was maybe put off by that. So I don't know, but
possibility.
to me, it felt very more natural. Like it would have felt very natural if like they hung out outside of work. Perhaps they moved. They lived really far away, and it was like not feasible. You know, maybe
That's true. Where that farm was located, or the chicken farm.
Yeah.
But it would have made sense for her to at least try to. I mean, attempt to meet outside of.
Yeah, that would have been like. I feel like that would have been like the first thing that would have attempted to, because it was like one of the like in the very beginning. Sat next to this Korean woman. They started talking, and it's like, oh, okay, that seems pretty natural. Like they could hang out after work.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah, that is true. Yeah. Why? At least maybe we should have at least seen some kind of interaction, especially after seeing Monica being
lonely.
It would have made a little bit more sense to see her making an attempt and maybe finding out maybe they're too different or still different, and there's no.
And it didn't work out. Yeah. How would you like this movie overall? Did you like it? How would you rate it? Are there any improvements that you would make to this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the movie. I think all the actors and actresses did phenomenal job, especially Steven Yeun and Han Yuri, right? They did the way that they interacted, right? As Jacob and Monica, a bickering couple.
Yeah,
I thought they did it well.
They did a well job. Good job. It was very convincing.
Very
when he slammed his desk and said enough, I was like, oh gosh, it's real.
He's really good. And then also Sunja, the grandmother, I thought she was she
really
kind of plays this happy, carefree, caring grandmother, did well. So I love the performances. But things, no, and just the whole plot and just having kind of seeing this lens from an Asian American perspective was very interesting, and I enjoyed that as well. But yeah, like I mean, this movie focused a lot, and it probably should. It's good that it had singularly focused on Jacob and Monica, and then Sunja and David. But Anne was kind of just there. I mean, she had like she was definitely just the side character, right? She was important to kind of help David and lead him away, but the story never focused on her, and which probably was a good thing, because we had like two main subplots going on, but I just wanted to note like, Anne was just kind of there, right? There's really no conflict. She's already older, right? So more established, and helping she's kind of like the translator almost too at the doctor's office, right? And just be able to speak English a lot more better, and knowing how things are. So she never really had the conflict, as opposed to David. She contrasts to David. So she's the older child, right? So she knows how to grows up and able to make sense of things. But David's still very young and try to make way of his make way of the whole world around him, which I thought was interesting. But I just wanted to know Anne was just even though I don't think she's an important part of the family, but just she was kind of just a side.
Yeah, she was a side character. In fact, if she wasn't even the character, I feel like the plot could have like worked out fine.
I don't know. I feel like she was there to contrast to David, right? So she's there to take care of David and help him not have to make like serious, because she's kind of like the older sibling, a little figure. She was there kind of not to like be like plot convenience, but like when their grandma gets a stroke, she kind of knows what to do. Like, let's go to church to get the mother. Or she's just I think or she's just there to play translator, which I think maybe Asian Americans can kind of connect with.
She's there. Okay.
So it's kind of like she's more convenience, right? So she's there to help like move things along, or just to be kind of serve as a foil, or just to show that there's an older sibling. So this way David doesn't have to kind of grow up, right? So he doesn't have to like he doesn't have to step into bigger shoes, because his sister will do that for him, or his sister has already done that and is able to take care of him, right? So there's no need to kind of have David kind of it's not about David kind of coming to age, or like trying to make sense of the world. He can still be a child, because his sister is there to help take care of things and help take care of other bigger things that the parents can do, that maybe we would expect David to have done if he were just an only child, I think. and this also allows the grandmother, to dote on him, and and not maybe because Anne can take care of other things and do other chores and whatnot. But so I think it's just also better for the family dynamic, just to show it's not just 3 members, it's just a 4-member family, and how they're trying to go about it. It might have been, I feel like, maybe a different story. It's just a psychic, but maybe it would have been nice to maybe show a little bit more prominent, maybe not with conflict. I don't think she needed her own plot line, or like her own plot line, her own conflicts, but just maybe showing her be a little bit more prominent in how she interacted. But that's not really a big sticking point for me. I just want to know that she is a character there, and we never really focused on her. We will always focus on the other other members of the family.
Right.
That was there.
That's true.
But yeah, the performances are great. What I would maybe improved. I feel like, I think my biggest point, as I said before, was just the climax. And I think you're right to how the fire, but I think before that, just having some time to kind of digest, right, from once they split apart to once that fire happened. Getting that time to like ruminate, like, oh yeah, this is like a tragedy that, the family is broken apart. There's nothing they can do to reconcile. And having that time to kind of us as an audience to accept that, right? It's just like, oh yeah, things are like, how are they going to get together? How are things going to, be happy, or like how are things going to even get worse from there now that family's apart? But kind of just jump straight into the fire in the next scene. And I think having a little bit more time will allow us to kind of mourn this family, and and then appreciate when that family comes back together. I think that would have been a little bit more impactful.
Yeah.
And then I think that's probably the biggest stick point. And then again, this plot, the whole family, we kind of see, Jacob and Monica fight, and I think it was important. This whole conflict was there, and I think that was done well. But I wouldn't say there's anything too much I would change. Maybe just the way that the farm life was portrayed. Maybe having a little bit more challenges, because we see, I think different aspects, like cherry picked, of him like losing water, having the dairy farmer. I feel like there might be more conflict, with Jacob finding on his farm, or maybe with Monica being a little bit more isolated and being alone and whatnot. But I think it was all portrayed pretty well. But I can't say too much. So in terms of final rating, I mean, it's a very simple plot, right? But again, through an Asian American lens, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I'd probably give this movie like an 8.5, I think. So it's still pretty good, right? But just some things seem simple, and some things I would change. And I think that near the ending, I kind of wished it did a lot better to could have done to elevate it. But I still recommend it, right? To anybody to watch it. It's a good drama to appreciate about family. But I don't know if it brings anything new to the table, except that it's just told from a different perspective, which is important, and just which I think other people can probably appreciate, since this is kind of a new lens.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall the film, I mean, there's the plot itself isn't like, it's nothing like phenomenal, I would say. Yeah, it's pretty like standard. Just like a family trying to get used to the new environment. Having internal struggles of acclimating to a new environment. And then, yeah, I think that like some of the things that. So this is the point where like, for me it's like hard to rate, because from a personal standpoint I did enjoy it. Because it was nice to see it from the lens of like, of just being Asian American and whatnot. Like it was like interesting to see that and sort of relate. I think the relatability really helped in some sense. But objectively, I mean, I think it was a decent movie. Overall, like it wasn't it wasn't bad by any means. Um, I think I would recommend it overall. But I don't think it was like universal. I feel like universally, I don't think it was anything like super noteworthy. Just because like I'm trying to like split it from like I personally enjoyed watching it. Like if I had a good personal rating, it would probably be like at least an 8. Like I enjoyed it. Also just because like I think it was like interesting to see like what direction it would go, and it ended up being a lot less darker than it could have been. But I enjoyed trying to like speculate how it would end. But the ending was like very like quick. Like agree. I did like the resolution, like the climax and the resolution. Like it was fine, but I think building up to that point it escalated very quickly. And I wish there was a little bit more breathing room to like get to that point, like what you mentioned before.
I mean, what other things would you would improve upon it, right? Because like aspects of the story. Because if you enjoyed it, I mean, that probably plays a part into it, right? You'd recommend it, and you like what was being shown, what the director shown you, right? So I was like,
yeah. I think for the most part, I would try to like improve how it was 2 hours long, right? Okay. I didn't feel like it was too long. I think the length is fine.
Yeah, I never really felt like this movie was too long. I've always felt like it showed great parts.
I guess the only parts I would think of improving were like having a scene with like like it felt more like it would have made more sense if like the Monica had reached out to the other like her coworker and try to hang out, and then maybe if that didn't work out, then like go to church or something. Just interesting that like that scene never played out. I mean, it's not like super important, but it felt like it would have been like more believable or convincing that would have been the first way to like reach out to build, make friends or whatnot. I think that's something that I thought was pretty that I think could have been improved on. I think I'm trying to think of the specifics of how to like build up to the climax, because it was very quick. Maybe there might have been like extra room for.
Well, I think for me it would have been just like trying to see how that would have affected each of Monica and Jacob, maybe even the family, their own mindset, like how they feel about this family breaking up, right? Just their personal feelings, just now that that's broken, like packing or whatnot, right? Just how they how kind of affected them, right?
Yeah,
and I think that could have been shown just as always more devastating, right? Just like, oh, this is really breaking apart the family.
Yeah,
and then it's the fire where they kind of reconcile. That, and then through that movie I said already is but yeah, just not original, but maybe seeing more of some of the more challenges that the farm is going through it within an Asian American lens.
Yeah, I think it's more so. I think it's more so like. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think I agree with that. Seeing how it would impact the family, the mindset. I think that's a good point.
Should you just say you're an 8?
I don't think I would put in. No, that's fine. I was thinking about that scene where Paul comes in to do the exorcism. I think that was necessary. I thought it was funny. So personally, maybe it was. I don't know if that was intended, but sure. I mean, I guess it can put me at an 8. I don't know. It just didn't. The film didn't like. It wasn't like. It was a very simple plot. It didn't.
I mean, it didn't have to be complex, right? I mean, it just had just showing it again. An Asian American family, kind of living, in a rural area, rural America.
Yeah.
And showing their perspective of it, right? The challenges that they go through with the Asian American flavor.
Yeah, I think like it wasn't necessarily like how it was. It wasn't necessarily because there was anything that the film did wrong. It just more so like I kind of wish that there was more interaction between the family and the community. Like there would have been like I know it was very family centric. it's a very family centric film, but like it, there could have been like I feel like there could have been more scenes where like they faced hardships. Because a lot of the hardships were internal. They were internal hardships, right? They were trying to.
But that's I kind of think that's what I liked about it, right? And I think that's what David and I were kind of previously touching upon, right? It's not like them having to face an aggressive outside society. It's more about internally. This is a story about family and how they're growing up. We didn't have to see. It didn't have to be a story that's preaching about racism is bad, right? Because obviously, if they go out into this world, right, that's probably, and especially during the 1980s. This is probably what they would have faced if interacting with the world outside of them. But instead, we get to see the struggle of a family in a setting of rural America instead. So we do see them have these microaggressions, but we get to see them it's a story about family, of an Asian American family, which it's kind of new and just never saw before. But I think it's just different. I feel like they didn't have to interact with the outside. I mean, we already see the effects, right? Like how Monica's kind of isolated and alone because she can't really relate to any of her peers and neighbors. And it's touched upon with the kids, kind of. But I think it was probably better that the story served with family. Maybe Jacob could have been the connection with the outside world and seeing how that's what for me.
Yeah. I mean, if it's all internal, if it's not really external, then they could have been in any setting. It didn't have to be in rural countryside at all. They could have made this film like for like. But I think it is all based. It is also based on like experiences from the director. I think that he put a lot of his life story into it.
Also, kind of drives home the point, right? If you're in rural, there's no one else you can go to, right? Because there's no one else around, right? And then if you're in the city, right? There's probably a different Korean community.
There is, yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense. He wanted to be a farmer. I mean, yeah, I don't have any like the film is fine. It's just like I think I'm just being more critical of it because I think there's a lot of stuff I related to, and I just wanted to try to like see it through more of an objective lens. Like for instance, if we had someone who wasn't Asian American who watched it, and I'd actually be generally interested in seeing what their perspective is, and I would want to like a more like honest, not like like it's a good film because I want to like appease my Asian American friends sort of thing. I actually objectively want someone to like see this.
I mean, the reviews that came in for this movie were pretty high.
They're very good. Yeah, they're very good.
And this won the best foreign film from the Academy. Right?
Well, it's not a foreign film. It's an American drama film. It's an American film.
Foreign language.
Foreign language
best
film.
Foreign language.
Oh, okay, foreign language film.
Which,
okay.
At the Golden Globes.
Right.
Right, because they speak mostly, and that's a whole different can of worms, right?
Yeah.
But it won awards, right? So I think Western media definitely appreciated this story and this and at least the general.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
That's fair.
But I feel like that's maybe not fair as well, right? Like saying like, oh, maybe what does it different? I mean, we're part of that audience as well, right? Like if we enjoyed it, we enjoyed it. It doesn't have to be separating it. And I mean, yeah, there's nuances, but I think we can still see it for what it is. Like, oh, it's a good story.
Yeah, but if we enjoy it because it's relatable, because of it's not universal. It's not like anyone can enjoy it, right? Like I really like films where like regardless of who you are, anyone can see it. Like anyone can appreciate it for what it's worth at its core. The nuances include like anything, like subtlety, everything could be appreciated regardless of like how you were brought up, how you were raised. You can take something away from it. I feel like in this case, like it's even in films I really like. Like I said, I like this film. I also really like The Farewell, but I feel like it's like the part that I really liked about it because like I personally really related to it because of my like upbringing, right? And so like it's a little bit harder to sort of like disconnect that from like whether or not someone else might see it in the same way, appreciate it like a lot more, I guess, in the same like similar way that I would appreciate it. And maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe it's like whatever. If I liked it, I liked it. I don't know. It's just more so like.
I mean, that's what I feel like what media is, right? Because you know, media is about like, you know, for everyone, like how relatable is it, right? Or how can you relate with the character? For us, it probably relates a lot more, but I think this story is still, you know, people can still empathize, right? We're still seeing a story about a family who's
But yeah, but media should be
Um,
appreciated. Should be able to be appreciated by like anyone. Like you can't
yeah,
just like you
but
can't.
this is, you know, those are the nuances, and I think anyone can still appreciate the story that is
Anyone
going
can
on
still
here.
appreciate it, but it's like whether or not like they would appreciate it. I mean, I think it's just more of like a nuanced question of whether or not like for instance, like if
Well, it's like just saying if an Asian American lead was in the movie, would people like not like that or generally? I feel like that's kind of a silly question, right? Even if it's a white lead, you know, people would, you know, probably appreciate the story. It just have different nuances and probably has a different cultural aspect, right? Let's say maybe it was instead of a, you know, Asian Korean family, maybe about Irish family, right? And maybe, you know, for seeing maybe instead of seeing the you know, their troubles and, you know, maybe their cultural nuances, we see like what, you know, maybe they're trying to, you know, reconcile an Irish identity with you know, American identity at that point, but it probably, you know, takes place a little bit, you know, back in time. I think, you know, your David brought up a good point, like how, you know, the story about the unorthodox Jews, right? There was a Netflix, and he still found it engaging, right? Just to see, you know, the story, even though he's not, you know, Jewish, you know, part of that family. He's just to see that lifestyle is still interesting and, you know, eye-opening, right? It still gives you a different perspective and a diversity. For at least for him, right, watching it. So I think, you know, this story probably could still be appreciated because you said you're right. There's nuances that, you know, maybe as an Asian American that we feel, I think is more important. But I feel like at the same time, a general audience could still appreciate, because this is, you know, a movie, you know, set in America, that I think, you know, and it has the same, you know, challenges that Americans do have, which I think is kind of universal, at least for an American audience, right? Maybe not for an international audience. So if someone from China watches this, or from Korea, maybe they're like, oh, what's this about? It might be different. But I think an American audience probably still enjoys same and you know, degree. But again, the themes might be the same and similar, but I don't know. I feel like it's, yeah, I think it's all about personal. Like the movie's all about personal journey and, you know, if we enjoyed it or whatnot, and how relatable we are to it. So I think, you know, trying to separate out is kind of moot, I would say. But yeah.
Okay, that's fair. I think maybe I'm just being overly critical of
An
Asian American movie. Yeah, because it's like I think it's geared toward Asian Americans specifically. Like maybe it is geared toward Asian Americans specifically. That's what I just don't like. I don't really.
But how about Black Panther? Right, same thing. Like, so it was not it was a, you know, general Marvel movie, but obviously had like, you know, demographic wise, right? All a black cast, right? And you know, all African.
Sure,
but
that one
but
is
still a very enjoyable movie, right? You know, very action flick, and, you know, what we expect from Marvel, right? There might be a cultural nuances that we might not have appreciated, but we still appreciate it as a good movie, superhero movie as it was. So here it's a drama movie about a rural family going to Arkansas, trying to pursue the American dream, right? Still a good movie in that regards, right? But there's just an Asian American nuance to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think Black Panther is. I mean, I understand what you're trying to say. I think Black Panther is different. It's very much a superhero movie. I mean, there is definitely the cultural aspect. But like, yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah. I think it's just being. I'm just looking into it too hard. I mean, I enjoyed it, so it's whatever. Yeah, I'd probably give it. I guess I would give it an 8. I don't know. There's not much I would improve onto it. I for the most part, it was fine. I mean, I was engaged. I think the ending was fine too, even though it was different from what I expected. But pretty sure that's like it's good. It was good. Yeah. Is there anything? I guess if there's nothing else you want to mention, then yeah, we'll figure out what movie we're gonna watch next. I'll put it in the schedule. For those of you who are watching this later, and then also like of course just the YouTube channel, which I will link. Should link to this now.
Yep, picture.
We'll decide what movie we watch next. We'll see you next time at 11 a.m. Pacific time with a new movie. And yeah, also for those of you who watch this later, if you ever want to partake, we take recommendations. So feel free to drop into chat, say what movie you want us to watch. If you enjoy our discussions, and we'll watch it. We'll consider it, watch it, and we'll discuss it. So,
right.
but other than that, have a great day whenever you watch this, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.